Hi, and a very warm welcome to Hamilton Central Model Railway for this July 22 update. The layout has a lot of work to be done on it, and it's far from perfect, but it's good enough that I can enjoy running trains on it. And the last wee while I've been really enjoying working with rolling stock and running them. So the projects for the last little while are to do with rolling stock. And we'll start with my weathering of the Dapol IKA wagons. In the rail network, these wagons are usually pretty dirty, albeit that the containers themselves are normally kept quite clean. So from my point of view, I consider the weathering of the wagons to be quite heavy weathering. And each of the 8 wagons that I've got, I've weathered them very differently in terms of the amount of weathering that they've all got. So this is one that's quite lightly weathered. So I've sprayed it up with a range of mixes of Umbro matte leather with matte black, and then I've wiped some of it back, and you can see the next one we'll look at now is much heavier weathered. So there's quite a bit of variety of the weathering that I've got between all the different wagons in the rake. And this time I've been working with using thinner, much more thinned paint, and then using more layers of it because I think I get a much better finish on it. And the second part of it is the containers themselves. So these are much less weathered in the real life, so it's really just a case of toning them down a little bit. So I've been using a little bit of grey again with matte leather along the top, and then along the bottoms and up the front and back of the containers I've used matte leather and black again to give them more of a dirt look. But really it's quite lightly done just to kind of bring them to life and to tone down a little bit of the sort of plastic look on them. But I'm really happy with the way that they've worked out, and they look great. Just with that little bit of weathering really just brings them to life. The next project was respraying an EFE J94 Austerity across to a new livery, which is that for the little locomotive Haulwen, which resides at the Gwili Steam Railway. And this little locomotive's got quite a special place for me and the missus. So I really wanted to have a little model of it running in the layout. So we start with, it was a relatively simple respray, just a little bit of basic masking, and then sprayed with a Humbrol green that I had lying in the collection. I don't even know really what colour it is, but it certainly matches the green of the real locomotive. The locomotive respray went really well, and I got a finish which is probably one of the best finishes I've had on an airbrush respray. Really straightforward, a couple of goes at it. What I won't win any prizes for though is my lining. I'm using an easy liner pen, which is as straightforward as you're going to get for trying to line locomotives with. I think the problem here was the paint. You should use paint at the consistency it comes out the tin at, but the yellow seems to be quite thin coming out the tin, and I tried 2 different batches of yellow and had the same problem with both of them, which was the yellow was spreading out when I was lining it on. There's about 5 goes to try and get the lining in the side of the boiler, and that's as good as I'm going to get, I think. But it's good enough, and it looks like the real locomotive. There we have it, Haulwen, which is Welsh for sunshine, which I think is a lovely name for a locomotive. The next piece of work was renumbering a Bachmann Riddle's Austerity 280 across to a number that was actually based at Hamilton Shed during the 1960s. As with any renumbering, it sounds simple, but it's not. And originally the plan was that this was going to get very heavily weathered because the Austerities really weren't very well looked after during their working lives. So it sounds as though it's a straightforward job, but as with any renumbering, we need to remove the old numbers, then apply the new ones. And the new numbers that I used were Fox transfers, which come on a black carrier film, which I wasn't too convinced about until I used them and got an absolutely perfect renumber on it. It's probably the best renumbering that I've done. Really straightforward, a really good result out of it. So they definitely get the thumbs up, the Fox transfers renumbers. After the decals had hardened, it's then an overspray with satin varnish, and I got a really good finish this time. I seem to have got the mix just about right for it. And the original plan to heavily weather it was taken back to a sort of medium weathering because I really liked the finish that I got on the locomotive. And once we had sprayed it and allowed that to harden, it was then weathering with Humbrol matte leather, Humbrol black, and then Humbrol grey. What I also did was I dry brushed a little bit of white on some areas, which just kind of brought them to life as well. So really happy with it, and it's amazing to think that this locomotive actually ran on the rails round about Hamilton.